Hey, what's going on everybody? So my last Grin Reaper video, I talked about how I think there's a lot of different builds that you can run in Torment 6 now with the introduction of ancient items, just because you get to a point where you're so over geared for the content that a lot of kind of funky builds that wouldn't normally work tend to do enough damage at that point to be viable in Torment 6 only. Now, I'll go ahead and preface the video by saying if you're somebody that wants to just completely min-max your character and your builds all the time, you should probably just skip this video. This build is really pretty efficient in Torment 6. In my opinion, if a build can do a Torment 6 Rift solo in 5 minutes or less, then it's efficient enough for me to run the build. Now obviously there are going to be builds that will run much quicker than that, maybe 2 or 3 minute rifts, maybe even less depending on the density of the rift and the layout and things like that. But this is definitely, you know, it's a video game. You want to have a good time, you want to have fun, and I think if we're farming Torment 6 over and over and over for Paragon levels and gear, which tends to be the case, then I want to have 10 or 15 builds that I can run in T6 if that's a possibility. And I think honestly you can probably get to around 10 different builds right now with Witch Doctor. So today we're going to run a cold Grin Reaper build, and I really enjoy this build mainly because it runs Lumbering Cold, which I haven't been able to run really to good effect since the beta of Reaper of Souls, which is, heck, almost, I guess it was about a year ago at this point. This build actually runs Lumbering Cold to really pretty good effect with the Grin Reaper Voodoo Mask. Let's go over the abilities. So we've got Spirit Barrage Phantasm. Summon a Spectre that deals 675% weapon damage as cold over 5 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards. And you can have a maximum of 3 Phantasms out at one time. So your own character can have out 3 Phantasms at once, and then you can have even more from your mimics from the Grin Reaper. So sometimes you'll see, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these things out at once, depending. The majority of the time what I do on most trash and elites is I'll cast 2 or 3 of these and then just start spamming Zombie Charger Lumbering Cold. So zombie winter bears crawl out of the ground and run in all directions, dealing almost 200% weapon damage as cold to nearby enemies. Now the thing about this ability is it doesn't look like it does that much damage, but you can position your character to a point where multiple bears are hitting the same target, and so once you do that with a lot of cold damage stacked and things like that, the damage gets much higher than that 200% weapon damage is cold. So we've got piranhas, frozen piranhas. Now Paranado does work extremely well with Lumbering Cold because you really need to be right up in melee, and the closer everything is together, the more damage output you have from Lumbering Cold. But with that said, we're running a lot of cold abilities and pieces of gear, and frozen piranhas is just too good not to run. I mean, it just makes sense in the build, and it's also off cooldown very often, which is nice. It actually does a lot of damage itself, really. Spirit Walk Jaunt for more movement speed and to, you know, just get out of bad situations and things like that. Horrify Stalker for more movement speed as well. We're also going to run a Rochelle's Ring of Larceny for more movement speed in T6. Big Bad Voodoo Slam Dance. Really pretty self-explanatory. More attack speed, more damage for yourself and your pets. We're running Rush of Essence. Really this way that we can spam Zombie Charger Lumbering Cold as much as we want. There's other ways to kind of fix your mana to a point where you don't have to run Rush of Essence, but this is kind of what I settled on that I liked the most for T6. You can run things like Honored Guest, Spirit Walk, and potentially even Reaper's Wraps and stuff like that if you really wanted to. We're running Gruesome Feast. I am running a Ancient Thing of the Deep, so you know, this is a really nice damage buff. We get mana from it, we get intelligence, and all that good stuff. Fetish Sycophants. With Spirit Barrage and Lumbering Cold, we'll have out at least 10 fetishes almost all the time, and honestly we have the max fetishes out the majority of the time. And then Grave Injustice for cooldown reduction more than anything, but the maximum life and mana is also nice when you kill an enemy. Alright, let's take a look at the gear. So obviously we're running the Grin Reaper Voodoo Mask, chance to summon horrific mimics when attacking, and honestly, you'll have out your 2 mimics the majority of the time. They proc really often with Lumbering Cold. One thing to keep in mind is just your positioning. The majority of the time you're going to be in melee range anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much, but just make sure you're positioned in a way that your mimics, when they do cast Lumbering Cold, hit a decent amount of mobs. You know, you don't want them to be completely away from the mobs. Say you're casting piranhas or Spirit Barrage at range, and then they're not hitting anything with their Lumbering Cold or something like that. So just keep that in mind. The positioning is relatively important in the build. We've got Zombie Charger damage on there for our Lumbering Cold with crit chance, and then I'm running a life percentage gem currently. Again, we're in melee a lot. I'm not running a Unity in the build. Which you could if you wanted to. If you really felt like you needed the Unity, go ahead. I don't really feel like I need to, but I did like to have a little bit more life just because we are in melee range so often. You could definitely run a cooldown reduction gem in the place of the life percentage gem if you wanted to. So we're going to run an Azure Wrath weapon, which it's ancient, so it's got a ton of damage on it. It's not particularly well rolled. It doesn't have main stat on it. You could probably put the main stat instead of weapon damage percentage in that space, but ideally you would have cold damage, a socket, percentage weapon damage, and intelligence would be the ideal setup. But the big selling point with this thing is the 25% chance to freeze on hit, which will proc very often, especially with Lumbering Cold. And then we're also going to run Frostburn Gauntlets. This gives you cold damage. We've got crit chance and cooldown reduction on it with main stat. And then also your cold damage has up to a 38% chance to freeze enemies. So again, another huge chance to freeze, and we're doing, pretty much only cold damage, except for our fetish sycophants that come from the passive. Those are physical. Everything else is cold though. So the majority of things are going to be frozen, which kind of brings me back to not really needing to run the Unity in T6. If you're not running Frostburns and Azure Wrath, you may want to run a Unity just because you are in melee so much. But if stuff isn't frozen from these two, then it's probably going to be feared and immobilized in place with Horrify. Especially with Grave Injustice, things dying so quickly, Horrify's up almost all the time. Just tons of crowd control in the build, which is one of the really fun things about it, in my opinion. So we're also running a Ancient Thing of the Deep. Again, just an ancient offhand is really what you're looking for. It gives you way more average damage. Really anyone is fine, just roll Zombie Charger damage on it, but I do like the Thing of the Deep, especially since we're running Gruesome Feast. To get that pickup radius is pretty nice. Really, as far as boots go, you could probably run illusory boots, something like that, or you could probably get maybe some kind of like Blackthorn's setup, get the two-piece bonus going on somehow. At the moment, I'm just running these Zuni Trail because they're ancient for one thing, and they have 15% Zombie Charger damage on them. I'd probably recommend illusory boots, though. That way you can just position yourself properly for your Lumbering Cold. And again, with the pants, really just any good pants with a decent amount of toughness on them. Ideally, you want them to be ancient for the extra int and vitality. You can probably just craft a pair if you want to. There's not really any pants in particular that are that great. Like I said before, you could definitely go Blackthorn's boots, pants, get you that bonus there if you wanted to. Get you a little bit extra elite damage. We've got a Witching Hour, not particularly well rolled, but again, just the extra attack speed for your pets, and the crit damage is also really nice. We are not running a Ring of Royal Grandeur, so we're actually running a actual 3-piece Augilds. So we've got the Augild Search, which is ancient with cold damage on there and crit chance. Then we've got the chest piece with life percentage, and then Augild's Power with life percentage and cooldown reduction. We're not running Zuni, which I have messed around with Zuni in this build a little bit, and the 4-piece is nice. The biggest issue that I have with that is the cold Fetish Army is like by far the worst Fetish Army. You only get 5 fetishes out of it. Now the cool thing about it is they're skeletons. They actually have a different skin to them, and they look awesome, but overall it's just not it's probably the worst one. It's either the worst one or the second to the worst Fetish Army rune. So hopefully they buff that soon. If they do so, then I may switch back to running some kind of Zuni setup in this build. But not running Zuni allowed me to run a Stone of Jordan with cold damage. This is relatively well rolled. Ideally, I would like to have probably crit damage instead of a main stat on this thing, but overall 20% cold damage, 30% elite damage, and a socket with intelligence is really, really nice. And then I can also run a Rochelle's Ring of Larceny this way, because otherwise I would have to either run a Zuni Pox or a Ring of Royal Grandeur to get the Zuni 4-piece setup going on. So we got the Rochelle's Ring of Larceny, which is also ancient, so it's got a lot of intelligence, crit chance, and then a 59% increased movement speed for 4 seconds after fearing an enemy, which it has a 4.1% chance to fear on hit as a secondary on the ring, and then also obviously Horrify Stalker is going to be fearing enemies to get that movement speed boost. So we're also going to run a S of Johan. I've been pretty much running this in all my videos lately. It's just one of my better amulets, and the effect is really nice, especially in this build, since I already talked about we're running Frozen Piranhas instead of Paranado. To group everything together pretty often for your Lumber and Cold is actually extremely good and will definitely maximize your damage with everything being grouped up like that. So let's talk about the legendary gems we're running. Bane of the Trapped is pretty much a no-brainer with all of the crowd control effects, the control and pairing effects that we're running. I mean, we're going to be getting this damage boost all the time, and on top of that, we're going to be in melee range, so we're getting the secondary effect as well to proc the first effect. So just a fantastic gem in this build. We're going to run a Bane of the Powerful, 20% increased damage for 55 seconds after killing an elite pack, and then a static 15% extra damage versus elites. And then the third gem we're going to run is the Marinate Teardrop of the Star Weaver. I've messed around with a few different gems in this third slot. This is by far my favorite. Gives you a really good amount of single target damage, especially on bosses, and it procs like crazy from Lumber and Cold. You'll see it be procking just all the time. Tons of damage from this thing. This gem actually really put the build over the top for me. I was playing around with the build, and it felt pretty cool, and I liked it, and it was relatively powerful, but once I put this into the socket here on this ring, the build was just awesome. It's like really fun to play, and it's really pretty powerful. Again, it's a Torment 6 specific build, but you could probably push potentially like into like early 30 greater rifts or something with a maximized min-maxed build of this, but it's not going to go any farther than that. It's really just for fun T6 farming. As far as Paragon points go, in core, get as much movement speed as you need. I have 11% on my boots, so we got 14% here. Then max out your intelligence. Offense wise, really get as much crit chance as you want. You want at least 50% chance to crit. That way you got that crit chance for your pets, but a lot of your damage, you have a lot of damage coming from your pets, but a lot of it's coming from your character and your mimics. So I mean, more crit chance the better. I think I've got around 54% right now, something like that. Then go crit damage. Then I'm going to attack speed, mainly just to buff my pets' damage, because attack speed directly buffs your pets, and then CDR. You could probably go CDR before attack speed, though, but the crit chance, crit damage is most important. Defense-wise, armor percentage, then life percentage, then all res, and then utility-wise, definitely resource cost reduction first, then probably area damage, then life on hit, then gold fine. You could go life on hit before area damage if you really wanted to. So anyways, guys, there's the build. We'll do a quick T6 rift. I'm going to turn my mic off for the gameplay portion of the video. As always, guys, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.